In this episode of The Soul of Life, I talk with songwriter and musician and social worker Dan Menz-Erb. We touch on where he found his soul and let go of religious dogma that taught him to be afraid of people.
You could be high, you could be drunk. As long as you weren't actively shooting up in the bathrooms of our shelter, you were welcome to come.
His identity as a musician in the band Holy Ghost Machine Gun.
When I got off the plane in England, they asked me to declare my profession. And so I sat there for a moment and I wrote on it musician. And it was the first time in my life I'd actually okay, I'm going to take this, this title, I'm going to take this mantle. And I get up to the customs official and she looks at it and she says, musician. And she says, what do you really do?
And hear a heartwarming song that he wrote that's perfect for life during COVID. Welcome to The Soul of Life. I'm Keith Miller, and my podcast, The Soul of Life, is here to help you remember who you really are. I'll bring together people who have gotten off their treadmills. I'll have conversations with athletes, musicians, doctors, scientists, healers, and entrepreneurs to discuss the fascinating edges of our knowledge in neurobiology, psychology, and physics. This is The Soul of Life. So I want you to meet a guy named Dan Menz-Erb. And I've known Dan for a while. Actually, I was good friends with his wife before she was his wife back in college. And so I've known Dan for a while. Talking to Dan today because he's a musician. He's also a social worker. And he was in a band called Jawbone Hill. And I was actually in a band just kind of coming to an end in college called Reason for Noise. And that's like a subchapter of my life, which is kind of like one of these rooms that I don't go into very often because it's, I don't know, I look back at it, it was like a weird hobby for me. So my band was like this, it was a rap group, and it was music that was designed to tell people about the Lord. In other words, it was Christian rap music. And so for me, now I've come a long way kind of away from Christianity. I really no longer consider myself a Christian. And so that's like a room in my house. Like as a teenager, this was something I did. It was like a wormhole, something that occupied a lot of attention. I thought it was really cool at the time, and look back at it and don't always think of it as very cool. So anyway, Jawbone Hill is this band. I don't even know if they were a Christian band. I kind of assumed that they were, because as you'll hear in my conversation with Dan, his background is similar to mine in that he grew up in a Christian, kind of fundamentalist Christian home and then moved away from it as he became a social worker, and is very grateful, like I am, for that progression and that journey. But Dan and I, so when I was going through my depression and coming out of it rapidly after I had fully embraced the medical side of things, one of the things that was happening for me was it was just like opening up associations in my mind. Certainly the medicine, SSRIs have that quality of really just allowing the brain to function more optimally. It's like performance enhancing. But really, so I was having these associations, like especially the first couple weeks when I was taking an SSRI for the first time. I would just remember things about my life that were they weren't random. In fact, they were, as I look at it now, they were parts of my brain like coming back to life that had been almost like unplugged, like you unplug an appliance and it just sits dormant. And literally, like, not just one plug, but like dozens of plugs were being put back in. And so I found myself one day just feeling like I'll just say called to go pick up my Bible. I know that sounds funny. If you're a Christian, that doesn't sound funny, but since I'm not, I guess it sounds funny to me. But I just went and picked up the Bible that was like the Bible for me when I was a teenager and when I was studying theology in college, and I just held it. It's an object, right? But it's something that I poured a lot of energy and time into that object. So it represents something very real, like represents real energy in my life. And I don't have a place in my life to read the Bible, but I think of it as, right? I think of it as a spiritual tool, right? Very similarly to now how I think about a drug like Zoloft as a spiritual tool. It's really just another tool that you can use it however you want to. So I decided to just pick it up, and I held the Bible in my hands, and it actually, I can't really explain to you this, but it felt like I was holding electricity. It was like very moving. It was like relief. I began remembering things. I did turn to like probably the 23rd Psalm or something and read that, and began to read it through the eyes of myself when I was younger. And I just made these connections all over the place. So anyway, back to Jawbone Hill. Dan is a social worker, and I wanted to reach out to him to just share with him what I had gone through recently with burnout and kind of these weird symptoms that I experienced, how I was doing, you know, just they were in the middle of getting ready to move to Texas. And so I said, hey, I'm starting this podcast. I want to talk to you about, you know, about who you are. And I shared with them how meaningful it had been for me to remember who I am. And that word "I am" is, if you're a Christian or in the Judeo-Christian tradition, you realize that "I am" is a theme throughout the Bible. It's moving and actually very touching kind of spiritual theme that God is referred to as "I am." It's kind of a mysterious or mystical thing. It's just, you know, I am. I don't even have a name. And so, I say this as a person who doesn't really identify as a Christian, but "I am" began to feel very, very strong for me as I began to remember who I was, and not be afraid of like just remembering and making these connections. Like I would go around the house and I would sing a hymn randomly to my wife, and it probably sounded really bizarre, and you know, like almost sometimes I've been known to be kind of sacrilegious. And but this was not that. I was actually really deeply connecting with those spiritual songs, and, you know, I remember them, right? So why close that door? Why unplug that cord of energy if that's who you are, right? So I wanted to talk to Dan and ask him who he is, and this was what was really cool. He just shared with me a song that he had just wrote, and so I'm sharing that with you today. Dan is a guitarist, and so I talked to Dan in this conversation about his identity as a guitarist. He's been a musician his entire life, and I really appreciated what he had to say about creativity and the courage that it takes to share who you are with someone and to share your music with somebody.
And social distancing, I'm alive and grateful for you. We talk through the fire as it burns pandemic blue. I am
So welcome to the show, Dan. Really glad to have you. You know, I guess I'm interested in kind of jumping right into, you know, who you are. As you know, that's been a thing that I've been thinking more about. It's like I've been doing my work for a long time, almost 20 years. I can't believe that, as a social worker and as a therapist. And I don't usually think about who I am. I usually think about what I'm doing. And I've just realized how much more healthy I feel when I'm more aware of who I am. So that's what made me reach out to you. I know I know you in a bunch of different ways, but I want to ask you to share maybe who you are. I know kind of what you do. You can certainly share about your work as a social worker. So tell me a little bit about you. I know you're a dad, married with kids.
That's the story, Keith. You wrapped it up. That's pretty much it. No, yeah. So I'm in my mid 40s. I'm a dad. I'm a social worker. I am a songwriter. I've been playing music most of my life. I've traveled around the country a lot. I've lived in a lot of different places. So as I've grown up, I've really started to valued more and more getting more adventure in my life. I love outdoors. I like a good beer, and I like people.
Yeah. Why social work?
So I originally, when I was very young, like most kids, I thought I was going to be a doctor for a hot minute. And then I started reading James Herriot books. And if you know who he is, he was a veterinarian who wrote about being a veterinarian. I think he was in like Northern England, but very folksy tales about taking care of animals. And that got me super interested in being a veterinarian. And I loved animals anyway. So for a long time, that's what I thought I was going to do. And then in my undergraduate biology program, it quickly became clear that I wasn't as smart as I thought I was, at least, or I wasn't as good at memorizing facts and, doing things like organic chemistry. So I was kind of a middle of the road student. And that was, that was a big shocker to me at, 18, 19. And I didn't know what to do from there. So, I did graduate with that degree. And while I was just kind of trying to figure out what to do, I decided to join AmeriCorps, partly just to buy time, I think, because it was something to do. And that I come from a religious background that my parents are Mennonite, and Mennonites value service and service to others and service to the community. So I had that sort of going through my life before that. So it had always been something I've been thinking about doing. So anyway, I joined AmeriCorps and I moved from Pennsylvania to Seattle, Washington, and I got placed in a homeless shelter there. And that experience really changed my perspective on the world in so many different ways. But one of the ways was that I realized that I was better at being a social worker than at being a scientist, and sort of sent me on that path.
Mm-hmm. So the placement you had, or the work you did in the homeless community at the shelter, something about that brought out kind of what you like about being with people or helping with people. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. So I think yes to the things that you just said. And also, it was a shelter that took in people that the local rescue missions wouldn't take. So there are a number of larger rescue missions in Seattle that would, if you sat through chapel, they'd give you a free meal and a place to stay. And the place where I worked would take anybody, no questions asked. You could be high, you could be drunk. As long as you weren't actively shooting up in the bathrooms of our shelter, you were welcome to come. And so there was this real spirit among the staff there that was like, this is where the work is. It's not about proselytizing or making people have to swallow a carrot before they get. Actually, I guess they wanted the carrot, as if the carrot was the meal. But yeah, so I was introduced to this whole community of people who work there, who believed in helping people just because. Not because they were religious or because they had that mindset, but because they thought it was the right thing to do, full stop, I think. And so I was really interested in that. And also, it was just really compelling work. I think on some basic level, like I was enjoying my day. I wasn't watching the clock. I was looking forward to going to work and having these experiences and these interactions with people. So it was just more invigorating. And I think, before I could really put it in the words, what it meant to be a social worker as a profession, I was already attracted to those aspects of it.
Mm-hmm. One thing that you said that stood out was about the work being invigorating. When it almost sounded like you said it was invigorating because there was, like, at least in that setting that you had, there weren't a lot of restrictions on what people needed. You weren't hoisting expectations onto people.
Right, exactly. So I think, at that particular point in my life, I was kind of starting what would be a very long process of stepping away from my religious upbringing and my thoughts about God. And so coming to a place where I could watch a different narrative in action, was very interesting to me.
You and I have spoken about this before. We have this connection as I guess, former evangelicals. even though I think some Mennonites would not consider themselves evangelicals. Maybe some would. But anyway, my background was evangelical Baptist in New England. And I kind of think that we're in a special club, sort of. Sometimes I joke to people I'm a recovering evangelical, and I don't mean to hurt anybody by that, but it's a special club for me. And I had the same experience in some ways of sort of like, whoa, like you mean there's ways of experiencing some of the amazing things I did experience when I was in a religious community outside of religious dogma. It was eye-opening for me. It sounds like that's kind of what you're saying.
Exactly. Yes. I don't know that I would have considered myself an evangelical. I probably didn't understand what that term meant when I was younger, like my, early teens. And that maybe was when I was the most like an evangelical. But I do remember, in my late teens and early 20s, that term was already changing so much. Like, what does it mean to be an evangelical? And I felt like it was changing a lot. But but to your point, like, I remember thinking, anyone who doesn't believe in God, how could they not believe in God? They're so lost. They're in the dark. I had all the language that we grew up with that explained and supported one. They need to be saved. They need to be saved. They need to, we need to help them walk out of darkness. And then when, you start to sort of pull that back and see that there's another way of looking at this. And even though that's, I think, in some ways very dangerous, from a personal moral background, it goes against the training and the, basic, I'm going to use the word propaganda of Christianity, but start to pull that back. I'm so grateful to have gotten that chance in that community. And it was people that like took me. I mean, I can't imagine what I was like as a Christian who was coming sort of to do God's work in Seattle. Part of the reason I was there is because of my Christian background, and landing in this non-religious homeless shelter that was by and large staffed by people who were not Christians. And they took me in with open arms, and they were so comforting and loving. And, as I've gotten older and gotten past it, I can see how they could have had a very different reaction to my naivety.
Totally. I had almost the same experience. My first job in social work, even though I had not begun studying social work yet, was as a volunteer coordinator for a nonprofit that served meals to HIV and AIDS patients. And this was in the late 90s, early 2000s. And the AIDS crisis had not yet really kind of shifted out of the crisis mode. And so the community that I worked in was mostly gay and lesbian, GLBT, LGBT. And so, coming from a Baptist background, that was like working with the enemy. You're listening to the Soul of Life podcast with me, Keith Miller. Every week I bring you a new episode that hopefully inspires you to reflect more on who you are and who you want to be in this rapidly changing world. If this time we share together moves you somehow closer to who you are or lights up parts of you that have been unplugged, I want to hear from you. And please share the love. Take a moment to find the Soul of Life podcast in the social media where you hang out on iTunes, Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, and let me know who you are. The people I worked with were some of the most loving, caring, and just compassionate people that I had ever met in any of my Christian circles. Unbelievable, these angels of the devil. I shouldn't joke about that. I really shouldn't, because I really do remain open. One of the challenges for me has been to remain open to people who are on a journey that includes religion and religious practice. And I think, anyway, I'll leave it at that. But so you might appreciate the joke. Maybe some people don't, but
yeah, I do, because I think I remember being not deathly is not the right word, but I remember being so uncomfortable and insecure around gay people and around people of color. And, this is even more particular to my experience, but even around people who are Catholic, because Mennonites have a long history with Catholics and a lot of persecution. So, and I didn't know any Catholics, but I certainly knew our history with Catholics. So when I started meeting Catholics, that was uncomfortable for me.
Yeah, we had the Catholic thing going up in Massachusetts for sure, because we were like, I was the only kid that wasn't Catholic. I was Baptist. And then they had this like, they'd say, but you're a Christian and I'm a Catholic. It made no sense to me, but Massachusetts is highly, predominantly Catholic. So yeah, we actually believed and had lots of jokes, in fact, about Catholics that were like, they're lost. They're not even Christian. Anyway, it boggles my mind, but that's not a new discussion. A lot of people have those discussions, but I do try to stay open to people who have experiences that include religion. I just think that it does serve a purpose, and have a lot of compassion and understanding, I think, for people there who are in some way getting a lot from that. So try not to go over the line too much with my jokes. Tell me about being a musician. When did you know that you were a musician?
So my dad, who has passed away, he was a musician, and he was self-taught on all of his instruments, but he loved to play piano. He was a great bass singer, and he loved 4-part harmony. He also dabbled in guitar and banjo and French horn. And, if he could find an instrument at a flea market, like he'd buy it and bring it home and sort of basically learn how to play it. So he was really my first introduction to like, oh, people can do this, not just the things you hear on the radio, but people can do this. And he taught me my first chords on guitar. So I owe a huge debt to my dad. I remember the first time I ever tried to write a song, and I use that term very loosely. But I remember recording like a little tape recorder, and the song lyrics had something to do with like, I'm an American boy. And that's all I remember about it. But I remember being like, I can make a song. Like I can do that. I can put words to something and like, record it and listen back to it. And I think that process of recording and listening back was kind of key to getting the spark for it. So, I don't know, 11 or 12, my dad taught me some guitar chords. I stopped playing. I got bored and it was too hard. And I didn't pick it up again until I think I was 14 or 15. And I met some older teenagers who played and who I looked up to and who seemed like cool kids and were into cool music. And they taught me enough to get me to the point where I was actually starting to write songs with a guitar. And that was really the moment when I was like, this is something I want to do, and started to, just sit in my bedroom, play guitar.
You had the fever.
I had the fever.
You caught the fever. I'm occasionally feverish about guitar. I've been playing guitar for a few years, and not seriously until the last year. And, I've progressed to the point where I would go out and do you know what GAS is among guitarists? GAS, the kind of acronym, Guitar Acquisition Syndrome.
You know what that is? Yes.
Okay.
I don't have it anymore. I used to like pore over American music magazine, like the magazine from there was like a mega store in DC that, I would just like pore over their magazines and like read about each model and figure, yeah, I did have that.
You did have gas. I've only got 4 guitars. Okay. But I kind of feel like I could use a 5th, and like, it's like, anyway, so I bought my first Stratocaster last month. And actually I keep saying that when I tell people my first Stratocaster. That sounds ridiculous. It sounds,
well, it leaves the door open, right?
See? Yeah, exactly. But I love it. So I'm over the cowboy chords, the chords in the first fret, and I'm in that horrible stage where I realize, I got to learn every note on the fretboard, and at least know where my fingers are going when I'm on different places in the fretboard. So it's like a new level, new devil, but it's fun. It's fun. I mean, I'm wondering, so you shared a song with me called John Bagwell. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
And I'm hoping to share it with my listeners. And It's so simple and melodic. I'm curious about your journey as a musician. When people hear this song, I think they'll resonate with the idea that it's simple and melodic, and the lyrics as well as the melody. Tell me about that song.
Well, first of all, thanks. I'm touched that you liked it or that you like it and that it meant something to you. The song John Bagwell is about my friend John Bagwell and a night that we spent together. He invited me over for some beers around his backyard fire ring. We talked about the anxiety of the moment in our lives. We talked about our families, our kids. Then we talked about he was kind of into the same bands I was, like Crooked Fingers and Red House Painters. And it was just this really nice evening in the midst of a very anxiety filled time in life. And he mentioned to me that there was a supermoon. So on the way home, I was biking home and I kind of made sure I got a good view through the trees of this beautiful supermoon that was out that night. And I think seeing that moon just kind of cemented that moment in my mind as like this very special moment in time when I was feeling all these different feelings, like anxiety and awe and wonder at the moon, but also grateful for this friend and this connection I had.
And you reminded me that friendship is a fire ring. Talk of crooked fingers and social distancing.
That song came out really quickly. I think I maybe wrote it that evening. I think I biked home and picked up the guitar. A lot of songs don't come out quickly. Some of them never come out. And, I'm not prolific and a lot of things die on the vine. So when something is happening, I just try to let it happen.
I am blinded.
One of the lyrics there is back at home through darkness till the supermoon breaks above the treetops, turning me into a speck of dust, a molecule of love. We're here for a moment, then the moment burns away. I am blinded. And I know it's always subjective, but it sounds so hopeful hearing that phrase, we're here for a moment and then, we're just a molecule of love. That's pretty awesome.
I'm glad you picked that up. I mean, I 100% agree. I find a lot of like comfort and release in the idea that we're just another biological species on the planet. And when I have my hopefully 80 years or so, that's it. That's the run I get.
Turning me into a speck of dust, a molecule of love. We're here for a moment, then the moment burns away. I am blinded.
These moments, like, how can we, be in it, be as present as we can, and then also to be the best version of ourselves in those moments and really celebrate and be grateful.
Yeah, I really get it, and I love it, and I hope listeners share it and love it too. Tell me what it was like to share that with me. I don't know, have you shared it with anyone else? Have you played it in concerts? I know you've been in a band before. You've been in a band called Holy Ghost Machine Gun. Curious about, because this music sounds different, I think, quite a bit different than that music, so did you share that? How did it feel to share that?
So, I've played in a lot of bands, and so often that's kind of the main venue where I try to, we try to write music, we try to record it, we try to put it out there, we try to play shows. We put out a website, we try to get on, get a Facebook, we get the whole thing rolling and try to make a little community around our music. And I've never really successfully done that as a solo musician. And I haven't tried that hard. And I think a big part of that is that I'm most critical about my own abilities. And I enjoy making music with other people. I prefer the team approach, but I still like to write music, and for some reason still end up doing it by myself. So a lot of what happens to those songs is I write them and forget them, or I write them and record them, and they don't go anywhere else. I have a handful of friends that I'll send them to. A lot of other songwriters and musicians. And, we'll talk about, we should, you should put some bass on this song, or like, maybe I should make an EP out of this, or like, what if we split an EP and you did this? And like, we do a lot of like sort of brainstorming around songs and album directions, but most of that doesn't come to fruition. Why did I share it with you, Keith? I think you emailed me, and it happened to sort of coincide with when I had just finished this song. And I think something about the tone of your email to me made it feel like, this might be appropriate. I'll share it with Keith, see what Keith thinks.
Yeah, I think it totally was. We were on the same chord, which is cool. I want to talk about creativity for a moment and perfectionism, because I shared with you in that email, as I have with many of my friends recently, that my discovery about my own mind, which was hiding a form of depression from me, it had the audacity. I'm a dude that knows what depression looks like. I've been treating people professionally with depression for 20 years. And so I was confounded when I didn't recognize it in myself, only until, except when my body began shutting down. And I had no choice. I had to look for answers. And I shared with you that my mindset on this side of depression in rapid recovery, I would say, because I embraced treatment fully, on this side of it, I realized that, wow, like I put so much time and energy. What the things that I think are important have to do with, like you said, sort of production and maybe wordsmithing an email, or, getting the polish out way, way, way before I've got any energy being generated for something. It's like, let's just get the polish out for this little thing and see if people are going to buy it, And I realized I was hurting myself by doing that. At a physical level, I realized that our energy, our brain, our bodies only have a finite amount of energy. We only burn a certain amount of energy every day. And I was using a big portion of that. My brain was using a big portion of that on production of things that didn't need to be. And I think of myself as a pretty authentic person.
Yeah. There's something about making music that lends itself to that as well. I mean, so I can relate. I mean, I am super critical of my abilities. And at the same time, I've decided that's just the way it is. These are the tools I have. We will reach the people we reach with our art, and the ones that don't want to be reached will move on, and that's okay. I think I've really come to appreciate this idea of, like, you take an idea, especially in songwriting, and you take time to cook it a little bit, but not too much. You put it out there, and then you assess what the response is, and then you take that information and you put it into the next thing. Instead of taking a year to make the perfect album and then putting it out and then assessing. That can really take the life out of you.
Yeah, I find that the more, I feel I have felt the same way about so many things at multi-levels in my life, that if I just focus on the steps I'm taking, each step, I mean, this is like a mindfulness thing, but it's actually just a life thing. I always love to teach this idea that mindfulness is just a fancy word we use now for life, like paying attention and being awake. If we just focus on the step we're doing, the idea that we're walking or running, like it's a controlled fall, that's almost ridiculous. We don't think about that. We're actually just catching ourselves every single time and then adjusting, catching ourselves, adjusting. And if we don't move forward and fall, there's no chance to catch ourselves and then propel.
It also makes walking more exciting when you think of it that way.
Way more exciting.
I'm falling. No, I'm not.
Yeah. And tripping is a whole nother subject. I'm going to be talking to a guy that has been on the leading edge, speaking of tripping, of doing FDA approved MDMA research, which is, been a drug that people use recreationally, but is therapeutic and has amazing capacity for therapy. So anyway, tripping just reminded me that it's not tripping when they're doing this. But anyway, yeah, life gets interesting. What would you say to new musicians? Like, I struggle with this identity. And I guess I don't enough to not share it. Like I'm comfortable enough to say that now. But up until really recently, I don't even know what it was. Maybe it was buying the Strat. I didn't want to say I'm a musician, because then, it's almost as if when I tell somebody that I'm a musician, they're going to assume that I'm like playing in bands, or they're going to assume that I've recorded with guitar. And
yeah,
that's terrifying.
No. I have to say that I think I still struggle with it too. So, I remember I wanted to study music as an undergrad, but my parents were helping me pay for school, and they were not interested in helping me pay for a music degree. So I didn't study music. And then another experience that happened not long, I think 2 years after I graduated from college, I went to Europe for the first time on my own. I backpacked around for a couple months, but when I got off the plane in England, they asked me to declare my profession. And so I sat there for a moment and I wrote on it musician. And it was the first time in my life I'd actually okay, I'm going to take this, this title, I'm going to take this mantle. And I get up to the customs official, and she looks at it and she says, musician. And she says, "What do you really do?" No. And it just took the wind right out of me. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, for me, I think it's a deeper, probably the same for you. It's a deeper issue of personal identity. You use the word healer too, and, in terms of our work as social workers. And I haven't, that's a word that I haven't been that comfortable using for myself. In the similar way of using the word musician. But at this point, I know what I like, and I know what I get passion and life from, and it is music.
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of music are you listening to right now?
Oh, not much at the moment. I just started a grad program, so it's been I'm reading in every spare moment I have. But let me think. Lately, the music that I've enjoyed. So I'm in Texas, but there's a radio station in Charlottesville, Virginia, that I can pick up in Richmond, Virginia, where we live when we're not in Texas, and it's WNRN, and so it's a local community funded radio station that plays. It's an interesting mix of artists that don't get on the radio a lot. So, Spoon is on there, and with a lot of Virginia artists and a lot of artists that are more Americana based. So one thing I do here in Texas is they have a bluegrass show every Sunday morning. So I still tune into that bluegrass show because I love starting Sundays off with some bluegrass. I've been listening to the Steep Canyon Rangers. That's a bluegrass band. Actually, I think they're the one that Steve Martin plays with them sometimes, comedian and banjo player. So yeah, I think in the last couple of years, I've had this sort of interest in listening to more bluegrass. But also I love it rock.
Yeah, cool. You reminded me of my question. I wanted to give you the sort of microphone to analyze me in my subconscious for what it's worth here. I have a hard time with blues music, and I know that as a guitarist, that's ridiculous because if I want to get to funk, right, which is a music that I really enjoy. I enjoy a lot of different kinds of music. I enjoy Beastie Boys, and I can enjoy bluegrass. So Yeah, the blues, I understand the importance of it musically, and I know I need to play it. But what would you say? Just like quick thoughts. Like, what's the deal? What's my deal with that?
What's the problem, Keith? I, a couple things come to mind. One is blues is all about repetition, right? So if you are like me and you're an okay guitar player, you play the blues, you have a few things you can do. After you do those few things for 15 to 20 minutes, you don't have any more tricks up your sleeve. You're just doing the same thing over and over again. So there's a lot of repetition in blues. And I think there's some fatigue that happens for me. We're both middle-aged white guys that come from, I think middle-class privileged white backgrounds. It's not a music that is ours too. So I want to recognize that, like, it's not from our background. We don't own it. Yeah. And, but and you could say the same thing for funk, I think, for a lot of a lot of American pop music. But I share your feeling about blues. I can't take it for very long. But there's a few artists, that I think do it really well. And I should have come up with a list before we talked, but sometimes the simpler it is, the better it is in my mind. Like when you just get down to really simple blues.
Right. I mean, I was, like I can handle Eric Clapton and John Mayer on the bluesy side, but like it like you nailed it on the head. It's like the repetition. I think you're saying that I'm actually impatient. Like I just want this thing to go somewhere. And George Clinton from the legendary funk band Parliament has this, lyric: funk not only moves, it removes.
Also, funk is so fun to play. One of my bands, Holy Ghost Machine Gun, was, we have a lot of funk, and a lot of the guitar lines are sort of based around funk guitar. It is so fun to play funk guitar. It's just,
I mean, can you play funk without moving your neck? Like, is that possible? Have you ever seen?
I find myself the funniest, like, mouth shapes of guitar.
Mouth, yeah, like this, like, it's like kind of like snarl on one side or something.
It's a little obscene, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like you got something weird in your mouth, but you want to keep it in there. I don't know. It's moving. Something's moving. I got jam in my leg. That's another line. I mean, when I asked you, I kind of put you on the spot. I said, "What music are you listening to?" And you're like, "I don't have time to listen to music right now. Kids."
Can you believe that though? As somebody who loves to play music, I'm not listening to that much music.
I totally believe it.
My wife loves the Indigo Girls, so the Indigo Girls are on in our house, like, I don't know, like 40% of the time.
They're like the first guitar songs I ever learned. They are. You can do, and they actually, people are like, "Oh, that sounds more than that." Some of the sounds they have, it's like a little more than. Sounds like there's extra in there.
Also,
there is.
One more thing, I remembered a blues artist, Junior Kimbrough. Listen to him, check him out. I mean, if I'm remembering correctly, a lot of those blues are not even based around the 1-4-5 pattern that a lot of blues are. He's on like the 1, and he stays on the 1, and the song just plays on the 1, and maybe he'll go to the 4 once, but it's so interesting because he makes it even simpler than blues.
Maybe we need to do that somehow. I mean, what would it look like if we played on the 1? Like, what would life look like if you had a day and you were doing that? Like, I mean, like, how we talked about the facial contortions and like how the body moves with certain music. I don't know. What would life look like if we're playing on the 1? Right.
Just
hanging there. Like, no, I'm not moving off this thing. I don't know. That's philosophical. It's for our listeners too.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what COVID is doing to us right now. It's making us hang.
Oh my God. I think you're right. That's what this is all about, isn't it? That's what this is all about.
It's stripping away.
Yeah,
it's
really
stripping away a lot of things from our lives. And for a lot of people, it's extremely scary and difficult. And, but yeah, it's simplifying and distilling things in a way that I don't think I've experienced.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And if I can just riff on that a little bit, I mean, I'm hearing that in so many different ways from different people. Like everybody's pulse rate seems to just be up. more than usual, and then we actually kind of forget that that's happening to all of us, and we feel like we're just going crazy by ourselves about something. And oh yeah, there's COVID. Oh yeah, I haven't been able to do the 10 things that I normally do this week without a lot of extra steps. The idea that you can stay on the spot you are, and that's what mindfulness is, right? Just focus on where you are right now, but really focus on it. Like if you're going to write a song that stays in a certain rhythm, wow, there's still a lot you can do with that. There's so much you can do without adding something new, without
right, and that's
layering on.
That's a little counterculture to the moment in the world right now too. I think we are inundated with data and information, and we're quick. We take quick bits of it all the time, and we move on. It's like we're kind of like sampling information constantly. So this idea of sort of slowing down and focusing, and I think it's super important, and it's very difficult.
It's very difficult to do. And I heard I don't know if you heard this, but there was some study, and I don't know if they validated this. I don't know how valid the study was, but they said like the average time that like people don't put up with songs in which the lyrics don't start within the first 5 seconds or something. Like they actually just don't like those songs, and they don't hear them. And if they, in the study, they just swipe, they don't listen to it. And so the attention span, the ability to delay gratification of like, okay, I know where this is going, I know how this is going to sound for listeners, has gone way down.
There's a songwriter that you might know, Denison Whitmer, who was from Pennsylvania, from the same area where I was, who is still writing music. And he is sort of like a master craftsman at writing the simplest songs and making them sound sort of meticulously put together in very beautiful ways. And he had just released some music not long before I wrote John Bagwell. And I think it was sort of in my mind, like, wow, this Denison has this ability to just write a simple song and just let it be that way. And I think that was an inspiration for me.
That's cool. Let it be. We'll end on that note. Thanks for listening to The Soul of Life. This is Keith Miller. Oh, and don't forget, please leave a thumbs up or a like for this episode wherever you're listening, so that others like you may find the soul of life. I mean, really, it's not every day you get to share the soul of life with someone. Okay, so you can post a comment or question on souloflifeshow.com. I'd love to hear from you. And please subscribe now to get the next episode. I look forward to sharing more of my soul of life with you.
I like it, and it's not harsh to my eardrum.
All right, I will go.